Hello, everyone. Welcome to Divine Spiritual Connection. This is the place where our experts and guests are going to share their wisdom and knowledge so you get to experience a taste of their flavor of light and love to help you on your journey to loving yourself and creating the life of your dreams. I'm your host, Cynthia A. Isaac, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you today Geoff Laughton. Hi, Geoff.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Now, Geoff is an internationally known in-demand relationship coach and expert. He is affectionately known as your relationship architect.
Or sometimes not so affectionately.
Oh, Geoff has two best-selling books. I gotta look at this. He's got two best-selling books, Instant Insights on Building a Conflict-Proof Relationship. The other book is Built to Last. That's the one I really got excited about. Designing and maintaining a loving, lasting, and passionate relationship. Geoff has also co-authored a third book, which is called Ready, Set, Date. For over 23 years, Geoff has been guiding individuals and couples to design their relationships that are based on spirit-led relationships and conscious relationships. So Geoff is also the CEO of the Involving Man, which is a men's community. He was going to speak to us from his heart and from his personal experience about his adventures in his 33-year marriage. Geoff, share with our audience a little bit about you, how you got to where you were, and then we'll move forward.
Okay. Well, so I began my adult life as a corporate employee, and after about 15 years of that kind of a life, I realized that I wasn't really very happy in that career. And pardon me, just so everybody knows, I'm in the midst of a cold. So if I sniffle and cough, bear with me. Anyway.
I got a little sniffly too, no problem.
So in my mid-30s, I kind of hit a really hard place in my life where I wasn't really getting the message that life was not really the right one for me, meaning what I was doing for a living. And so I started doing a lot of work on myself with different teachers and different transformational kind of work and workshops. And I really got reconnected with loving that whole healing and transformational energy, those kinds of environments, and realized then that that was really what I needed to be doing. So since the mid-90s, I've been coaching people, beginning as a life coach, quote unquote, life coach. And after a few years of that, starting to see that couples were coming to work with me. It wasn't really anything I planned on. It kind of was what the universe had in mind, in my belief. So I found that I really loved it. And also because I was very clear that my wife and I had a relationship that was pretty abnormal, insofar as our love for each other was deep. That's not the abnormal part. What was abnormal was the reality that we'd already been together almost 10 years when I made this career shift.
Okay.
And so over that amount of time, a lot of marriages already start to unravel and crumble. And ours kept getting stronger. And so I really wanted to be able to help people tap into that kind of possibility for themselves, whether they were in a relationship that needed help or if they were looking for a relationship that was really the right relationship for them. And also, you know, wanting to help parents be able to have a better idea how to create a better foundation of what a relationship, a healthy relationship could look like for their children's benefit when their children grew up.
Yes.
So that really got my whole life off on a very different trajectory that has led to everything you read. So been doing it a long time. And the books came, and the Evolving Man is work that I'm doing for men. So ladies that are watching this, if you're
Yes.
wondering what the hell does it take to wake my man up, send him to theevolvingman.com. Anyway,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. Did you hear that? Theevolvingman.com. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
you bet. And then I'm also a dad, and I'm a grandfather. I've got 2 granddaughters, and that's me, the human being that you're talking to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Geoff. We're talking about divine connections here. And Geoff, what do you feel the divine purpose? What do you feel is the divine purpose of relationships?
Well, I really believe that if you think about a guitar player or, you know, any musician that plays an instrument live,
Mm-hmm.
that musician needs to have an amplifier so that the people in the audience can hear their instrument.
Yes.
And what I really fervently believe that I have in my relationship, which, you know, is plenty imperfect. You know, we've had plenty of problems and issues over the 37 years. We've been married 33 and been together for 37.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're perfect and it's like out of a Hallmark card, but I really believe that at its best, a relationship, when it's really right, when the people are really compatible, that ends up being like an amplifier for each person's spirit to be coming out even more out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And at its best, the relationship keeps amplifying those qualities of who we are as spiritual beings having a human experience
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, makes each person better. And also, you know, the way I've always talked about my wife is that when I look in her eyes and I feel her heart, I
Yes.
feel and see the face of the divine and the energy of the divine in her.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's what we're talking about, like the purpose of relationships. And you're saying specifically how when you look at your marriage, the distinguishing factor is you're seeing that amplification that's going on, and that
Mm-hmm.
is, and when you look at her, you're seeing an expression of the divine.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And when when we have problems and, you know, we're pissed off at each other or we have some issues, the thing that I strive to always come back to when my mind is in some kind of reaction is to remember that she is definitely an expression of the divine,
As
and
you are as well. Mm-hmm.
yep,
Mm-hmm.
and that connection is really an expression of all of that. And so if I'm being a butt, that's not really how, if the divine came right into my living room here and said, I'm here, I wouldn't treat the divine like I sometimes can treat people I love. So it ends up being a great truing, the true back to what's really more of the absolute truth to me, which is, this is my partner is somebody that, I really love both for who she is as a human being, but also that particular expression of spirit that I hold her to be.
Absolutely. I love the fact where you shared about not only who she is as a person, but that spiritual aspect of who she is. There's a concept that, I don't know how many people believe in it or not, but the whole concept of soulmates. Tell me a little bit about that, how you feel about that, if you feel that that's what you're experiencing, and share with our audience your concept of soulmate and your experience, your life experience about that.
Well, when I was younger and was much more enthralled with what I'll just call new age thinking,
Mm-hmm.
my belief about soulmates back then was that I tended to put it, pardon me, I tended to put it up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And I felt that, number one, my soulmate would be much like I've described my wife being for me, but I added this whole kind of romanticized,
Mm.
Hollywood infused,
Mm.
I can just bask in your presence and all of life will be perfect.
Beautiful. Perfect. All the time.
Right. That didn't happen.
No.
So, really seeing that I had this ideal that in hindsight, what I've learned in the time since is that a soulmate isn't the power source to plug into to make everything okay. They're not the divine itself, but an expression of the divine and really divine possibility.
Mm. Mm.
And that has to also share space with someone's humanity. So I think that kind of the old romanticized idea of my soulmate is the one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I've learned also is that if there are soulmates, which I tend to believe are other spirits that might be part of kind of like a soul family, if you will, that doesn't always turn out to be our romantic partner.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
I have friends who I clearly, people that I felt an affinity and a deep, deep love for very quickly. I hold that they're like a soulmate, but they're not my mate.
Exactly.
But like you have a roommate, you
Mm-hmm.
can have people in your life that are soulmates that also help illuminate those divine qualities within each other, that we can mirror that and reflect that to each other. So that to me is a more grounded, and I think in my older age is a more I don't know the word for it. It's a more pragmatic and practical way of looking at it that acknowledges that, again, if you believe like I do that we're all souls or spirits having a human experience,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people wanted to use soulmate, that concept, as a way to go right to spirit without having to deal with any of the crap that's involved in being a human being. Pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't get, I mean, you can try and bypass all that, but you really can't escape the fact that you're a human. And so
Absolutely.
you have an ego, and
Yes.
egos like what they like.
Yes, and we do have to deal with the human portion of it, which brings me to the question of, and you mentioned the whole Hollywood aspect of soulmate and romanticize, and in reality, we could have different levels, different types of soulmates, roommates, parents, friends, coworkers, whatever. There indeed is a romantic, but there are also others. With that in mind, and I think talking more probably about the romantic, or what is the challenge? Like the soulmates are here to match us. They match us. They kind of match our values. What is the challenge in that soulmate? What are some of the challenges you've experienced in the soulmate relationships?
Well, when I was younger, the one of the first challenges was coming to grips with the fact that I felt like I had found my soulmate, but things weren't always warm and fuzzy and happy and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that probably the biggest challenge for me and the people that I know that believe that they're with a soulmate is they're still a human being. You've got to get past that new age kind of spiritual bypassing concept of
Very
what
fairy,
soulmate.
fairy. Mm-hmm.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one challenge, because if you think, oh, you're a reflection, or you're a chunk of the divine that I get to live with, you still have to deal with that humanity. And I think that, that combined with what your expectations are of a relationship period.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look for a soulmate because you think that is the only really great relationship possible, you're already getting off on the wrong foot.
Yes.
That I just think it can be fraught with expectations and ideas that aren't particularly grounded. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It really does. One of the questions I'd like to ask about that, and then we'll move to something different, is you mentioned earlier that over at least a 10-year or 10 plus year period, you've seen other relationships that didn't make it. And you not only did your relationship stand the test of time, but in many ways it improved. So my question would be, what can people do, particularly, if they're in this relationship that, okay, it's a divine relationship, it's the soulmate. However, we are human, and therefore we experience human experiences, faults
Mhm.
of humans. What is it that we can do to make sure or keep that divine aspect in our relationships?
The very first thing is you cultivate your relationship with your own divinity. You cultivate a relationship with your own spirituality. And if you don't consider yourself to be a spiritual being, the advice still holds, because if you at least believe, as anybody who's ever been with somebody when they actually passed,
Mm,
there's no question
mm,
that every human being has a spirit. And when that spirit leaves, Elvis has left the building. You really get that we're just kind of a walking suitcase for that spirit, these bodies.
yes.
So even if you just believe that you have your own spirit, that's more than enough. And you need to put your priority on growing that, immersing yourself in that as best you can. So that can be through I mean, for some people, it's religion. That isn't it for me, but for many, that is a way.
Mhm.
For others, that can be meditation, that can be mindfulness, but it's really making sure if my wife, for example, is going to be an amplifier of my divine signal, if you will, because
Mhm.
instruments send a signal through the mic that then goes into the amp, and then the amp blows
Yes.
it all up.
Mhm.
So I have to be responsible 100% for my own relationship with me and my spirit. And, and when I'm doing that and I'm putting, that as a top priority, then what I bring to the relationship is a whole different ball game, and makes it easier when you do hit hard places, which every relationship does. Life deals you cards that you didn't plan on. So when, like in some of our hardest periods that we've gone through, the blend of our commitment and realizing, really believing that we were soulmates in the best, most realistic sense of that word, that was worth fighting for when either of us or both of us were forgetting who we are as beings.
Yes.
So that's number one. Cultivate, and even if you're not spiritual and you're listening to this and maybe rolling your eyes,
Yes.
you need to be sure your relationship with you is rock solid if you want a marriage or committed relationship to work. Because if you're not good with you, that means you're expecting your partner to provide all those missing pieces that you're not okay with. And when you do that, you're screwed.
Mhm.
So that's called codependency.
Yeah.
So get right with you.
Yes.
And that's also, here's, I guess, a second suggestion. Don't look at getting right with you as something that if you read enough books and you work hard enough, in a few months, you'll get that.
No, no.
I'm 61. I've been working on getting right with me for the last 30, 40 years.
Yes. It's an
Right?
ongoing process.
Totally.
Absolutely.
So you've got to be, really realistic about that. Another thing I'd say is that people, and I think maybe when you feel like you're with that more romanticized soulmate type of being, almost like you've captured lightning in a bottle,
Hmm.
and you don't want to lose it. You want to kind of
Hold
keep
on
it
to
all in here, and that is another surefire pathway to a relationship failing,
it. Hmm.
is that you forget that that initial spark, soulmate or not, was that initial spark. You've got to keep nurturing it. And if you try and have things stay the way that they began, and like me, you're with somebody for decades,
Hmm.
the amount of change and growth that can happen over time is so enormous. And a lot of long-term relationships that I work with, if they don't make it, more often than not, it's because they they wanted their partner to stay one way. They
Hmm.
wanted to keep both feet in a past that doesn't exist anymore,
Hmm.
rather than using the relationship as an amazing growth vehicle for both people to keep evolving and moving on down that evolutionary road, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. You've got to have all that.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you brought it in that each individual has a responsibility to what I call love themselves. You know, you have to fall in love with yourself. You have to truly, truly, radically know yourself, love yourself. And in that, can you now bring the gift of love into the relationship? And not
Right.
just a one-time situation. It's a continuous, ongoing, continually growing, continually exploring and becoming the best version of you continuously. And as you do that, when you do that together, it just makes the relationship even more impactful. But it does start with each person individually, first and foremost. And then as you come together, as people often say, 50-50. You know, you come with 50, I come with 50. Oh, no, no, no. 100, 100. Whole, whole, complete, complete. This is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yes.
I
Yes.
couldn't agree more.
Yes.
I'm 100% responsible for me. I'm 100% responsible for how I'm experiencing my life. If my wife is pissing me off, I have to look at how is that about me, which is never anyone's favorite thing to do,
Yes.
I've found, but it's really valuable, a valuable thing to do. And so if we're each bringing 100% of us, yes, two people are bringing 50% each, give or take, at any given time to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But your job, my job, is to manage our side of the road and then share that with our partner that we feel, you know, is the right person, and relish their bringing the same 100% of them. And then there's a synergy that can happen
Yes.
that kind of creates this we or us that can really be an awesome blend of the human and the spiritual that just kind of creates a yummy
Mm.
yummy possibility.
Yes, yes, yes. When we first talked, you talked about the Built to Last. That's the book you wrote about the relationships. And you probably talked a lot about it already in this conversation. But is there anything that you would like to share about that book, why you wrote it, how it's affecting, you know, what you're doing now? Tell us more about that Built to Last when it comes to
Sure.
relationships.
Well, it originated out of me getting the idea from my business coach. We were looking at what I do and how I do it, and then she got the brainstorm about, you know, your relationship architect.
Mm-hmm.
That, because in conversations we had, I would talk about how over all the years that I've worked with couples, and individuals who wanted to be in a couple at some point, that there was so much that people didn't know. I mean, you know, there was never one class in high school, and not many that I can remember when I went to college, which is a long ass time ago. There was no real textbook
Yes.
about how to have an amazing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that then got to the whole thing around, well, if you were going to buy a house or if you were going to build a house,
Mm-hmm.
you get a lot and you want to build your own home on a piece of land. Well, you gotta have a design. A builder can't build anything without a blueprint. And to have a blueprint, you got to know what you want.
Oh, wow.
So that began the whole thing that fell into place around, well, you got to design what you want, then get the blueprints and all that, and then you got to build the thing. And the building is something that really goes on for the life of the relationship. And once you have it built, then you have to do routine maintenance on it.
Love it. Yes.
Relationships are no different. So the book really kind of came out of, in particular, working with so many men over the years as well, you know, in addition to my coaching practice, working with men, leading men in groups for so long, I realized, you know, how little men really knew about how to pick the right partner. How, you know, didn't have any idea about designing anything. The general American concept is you meet somebody, you fall in love, you get married, and then you stay married and live happily ever after for 50 or 60 years until one of you keels over. That's not been my experience.
That's
That's
not
not the way it goes.
most experience,
So
unfortunately.
I wanted to write a book that was really, I wrote it primarily for men. Kind of like, okay, if there could be a user manual about how you could best pick the person that you're really meant to be with. And if you both got that far, then what's the relationship you want to design and then build and maintain? So that is how the book came about. And I also knew that if I also wrote it in a way that women would get it, because over all the years I've been doing coaching work and, you know, transformational work with people, it's getting better now, but in the past, most of the men that ever came because their women said, get to a
Either
get to a
over
coach,
here
get
or
to a
this is it.
workshop.
Yes. And
You
also
know,
read
you
hard.
gotta, you know,
You know,
it
there's
would be an ultimate. Say again.
I said the attitude then may have been, you know, to the women speaking to their men. Okay, we got to do this or else. You know, there's going to be problems. We're going to break up. It's not going to work. You have to do this. We have to do this together.
Right.
And I do believe that more men are becoming more conscious and more aware. But you're right. For the most part, women will tend to seek out help, counseling,
Right.
therapists, you know, for these types of things where men, unless they're edged or encouraged by a woman, as a rule, they would not and had not been seeking out. But things are changing. Things are changing.
Very much so. I've really been amazed and really heartened by, in the evolving man community, a lot of our growth of late has been fueled by younger men.
Okay.
You know, men in their, I'd say like about mid-20s to mid-30s. I had my head so far up my butt in that age period, I wouldn't have known light if it was like, anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm very encouraged by the fact that younger men are really number one, they're wanting community with other men. Because in my generation and before, men, you know, could only be communal or have community around sports or making money or, you know, talking about things that were more superficial.
Yes.
And men really want to go deeper, and they really are missing having male friendships. And so when men have that, what they can then bring to their partner, be it male or female, is a completely different deal. So much more that they have to offer.
Yes.
So that's what that book really began.
Yes. Well, that's, I mean, I just love that. And I'm going to have to really, I can read that more. I love that whole aspect, how it came to be and the purpose of the book itself. Geoff, you have shared so much with us and I really appreciate that. At this point, you do have a gift for the audience. Would you like to tell the audience about the gift that you have available?
Sure. So I was talking a few minutes back about how you've got to design your home the way you want it, and you have to do the same thing with your relationship. So I put together a 5-part video series, and each video's about 10 minutes or so. So we're not talking a huge amount of time. And it's all about setting your relationship up for success. So again, people don't know how to look consciously for the right partner, and then whoever you do find, how, it shares some key tips about what are some factors that you want to take into account, what are some ways to really proactively set yourself and your partner up to win.
Yes, wonderful. So this is the gift that will help them do that on their
Yep.
wonderful. We thank you so much for that. Now,
You bet.
audience, I love for us to listen to these interviews, but more than just listening, my intention is that you take away something, a suggestion, a word, a thought, a book, anything. I want you, as you're looking at these, to think about for your own personal use, what can I take from this that's going to help me move, transform, get closer to loving myself, creating that life, and being that person, to have the life of our dreams. So I'd like you to think about that, and whatever that is, please respond and let us know what it is. We'd love to know. And Geoff, before we wrap it up, I would like to ask you if there's anything else that you would like to say to our viewers, our audience, before we wrap this up and get off for today.
Sure. First of all, thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for paying attention to what Cynthia and I have been talking about. And I guess my parting gift tip for taking away from this talk is, remember the part about get your relationship with you on solid footing first, and then you're going to be much more likely to attract a partner that gets to be that amplifier that we're talking about for you, and you get to be that for them. And lastly, be patient. Relationship is an always unfolding thing, and people seem to be in too big of a hurry. So take your time, especially if you're watching this and you're dating. Don't rush.
Yeah.
Where's the fire? Just really let things breathe easily and spaciously, and you're much more likely to make a better choice.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful words of wisdom. Thank you again for being here. I love it. Thank you, audience. And with that, we will close for today. And until next time, love yourself fully, radically. Good night. Bye now.